right, folks, good evening and welcome. Thank you for coming to our Chamber Talks tonight. This is our third year of Chamber Talks. We started this a couple years ago with what we had hoped would have been here, but ended up being a virtual presentation. And then last year we were able to come back in person and meet here in this beautiful theater. If you haven't been here before, I hope you appreciate how really cool it is. They've done all the theaters in here over. It really makes coming to the movies a great experience. My name is Tom O'Rourke. I'm the president of the Chamber, and again, I want to welcome you, and I want to thank our sponsors for this event tonight, the Norwood Bank, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey and Lehane, and Brigham Health in Westwood and Foxborough. We truly appreciate their support. This is really a fun and cool event. We had a good time here last year. We'll have a little bit of entertainment halfway through and out in the lobby afterwards. But you're also going to hear some great speakers with some really informative talks to share with you tonight. So you have your programs. I'm not going to read everybody's bio because their information is there for you, but we just want to get right into things. So what I'd like to do is invite our first speaker, John Cruz, from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, to come on up and talk to us about the housing crisis.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and while he's going ahead and getting the slides up, I want to introduce myself. My name is John Cruz. As he mentioned, I'm a planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and we are the planning council for the greater Boston area. We serve 100-some communities, mostly the folks within the 495 freeway belt, and we serve as a technical assistance provider and an organization that really helps the communities in the greater Boston region solve their problems. And I work on the housing team, so that's a big part of what I do, looking and seeing what the housing challenges are, figuring out what we can do to try to move things forward. So today we are talking about a pretty substantial challenge, and that is just the overall challenge of the housing crisis and what that is and what that means for greater Boston. So the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is something that's probably not a tremendous surprise, even though it could look like it when it's all drawn out like this, and that is the fact that we are one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. We can see that we are number 5 over here on the left, right behind New York and San Francisco. These are the top 50 in the United States for metro areas as far as the median rent goes. All the way over on the left is Baltimore, a little bit over $1,500. Somewhere in the middle is Tampa, and then, like I said, we're just shy of San Francisco, New York, on par with areas like Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., things like that, at an average of a little bit over $3,000 a month. Quite a good chunk of change. What we're noticing is that we're seeing the rents go up as a result of things like this happening. We're watching a lot of cost burdens increase, and this is an official term that's used by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and what they do is they take a look at this stuff and they say, well, how much, and there goes the projector for whatever reason. I'm going to keep talking. You guys probably saw really quickly, it looked like there was some green numbers on the right and some black numbers on the left. Those illustrate the difference in the housing cost burden. And what that burden means is HUD takes a look at all this stuff and they say, if you are spending more than 30% of your income pre-tax, you're housing cost burdened. If you're spending more than 50% of your income, you're extremely housing cost burdened. And then, of course, once you start tacking on things like transportation costs, your car payment, the insurance, all that sort of thing, you can see where this starts to really eat into the budget of everyday people who are just trying to get by and figure out what they can do and make sure they're able to buy their, school supplies for their kids and keep the mortgage going on and all the different things going on needed to make sure that the house is staying up on things. So even though this is cost burden for housing, we see a lot of concerns on the renter's side and on the homeowner's side. And what we've seen is that it's increased substantially over the past 30 years. and even further back going into the 90s, 80s, 70s, where the more we get into the modern day, the more we are seeing these rent burdens increasing. So over on the right, we can see what things look like in 1990, kind of sort of as it's flashing. And then over on the left, we see what it looked like in 2014. And even though we're kind of flashing all over the place, we see it's much higher at the different income brackets, where folks who are extremely low income are much more burdened. And we're seeing that almost 100%, nearly everybody is burdened this way. So I'm going to keep trying to talk and just have a conversation with you folks while we go ahead and work through all these AV issues so that we can keep our program rolling tonight. And the other part of this that we're really starting to see is that as all of this stuff is happening and we're seeing costs go up and people start making choices and changes, we're seeing that they're moving to other metros and they're looking for opportunity in other places. So if you look at a city like Portland, Oregon, for every 10 people we lose to Portland, we gain 3. For every 10 people we lose to Seattle, we gain 8. For Denver, it's 7. For Miami, it's 7. For Dallas, it's 7. So we're seeing more people moving out than are interested in moving back here. And the cost is a huge part as to why that is. So you might ask yourself, what in the world is going on? And how did we get here? And the biggest thing is that we have a growing population. It's still a part of the world that's very attractive. People want to live here, which is a great thing. Except when it means that we're seeing lots of people moving in and not enough housing units being produced to house them. So you end up with overcrowding. You end up with people that don't really have suitable units that are working well for them, and things of that nature. We're also watching a really interesting phenomenon happen as a very large generational cohort, the baby boomer generation. They're moving out of the workforce, they're starting to retire, but because jobs are opening up, that also doesn't open up housing opportunities. So we see more jobs, lots of companies are hiring, lots of interesting stuff happening in lots of different industries. But what happens? The households will only drop 13%, while the labor force will decline by 70%. So where's that gap going to come from? Where are we going to be able to make that up? As we see a lot of housing that's being utilized, and just because the jobs come available, it doesn't mean that the housing is going to be available with it. While all this is happening, we're seeing a big increase in the polarization of the income in the area. And without getting too far into the weeds of what this is, because we only have limited time, we're looking at Boston in the inner core and then the rest of Boston, and we're seeing increases in the extremely low income over on the left, and the extremely high income at over 200% household income for the area median. And that area median is, I want to say, around $140,000 per year per household in the greater Boston area. So lots of people who are doing really well, making lots of money, great jobs, doing all the stuff, living the American dream. Lots of folks who are struggling, increasing numbers of people that are struggling. And then everybody else in the middle, we're seeing those numbers dip because they're moving to other places, other cities where they feel like they can have a little bit more opportunity for different housing options. We're also watching a lot of production falling below the historic peaks for what we used to see. We see how things were produced in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then a substantial drop, a little bit of an uptick in the 2000s before the recession, but you can see the comparable numbers aren't even close. And these are the annual housing production numbers as we try to figure out, well, jobs are increasing, people are moving here, but again, the units aren't being built, and there's not a lot of places for folks to live. They're having longer commutes, longer time driving, longer time on the trains, taking small towns that used to have a small town character and are now moving there, trying to increase density and things like that because there's not a whole lot of other options. Massachusetts has one of the lowest rates of housing production in the United States. And we can see where we're at right here with the yellow over on the right. And there's maybe 8 or 9 states ahead of us. Almost everybody else is producing a heck of a whole lot more housing. So that is kind of the crux as to where things sit. It's an economic development concern. It's a quality of life concern. But let's take a look at things really quick and wrap up because I want to make sure that we're mindful of time and take it into a local context. Here at MAPC, we're in the process of finishing up a community master plan for Dedham. And we talked to the folks that were doing the housing part of this, and we talked about what they heard from the community and what the recommendations were for how to fix some of this stuff. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this big graphic here at the bottom that shows that we have what's called a situation of, quote, missing middle housing. And that means we have lots of single-family homes that get built. We have lots of big cranes and big apartment buildings and lots of big fancy stuff that developers love that gives us this. But there's not a whole lot of condos. There's not a lot of non-luxury housing being built. There's not a lot of 2-unit buildings or 6-unit buildings or small apartment buildings where someone could say, you know what, I'm not necessarily ready, or maybe I don't want to spend $600,000 on a single-family home with a giant yard. Maybe I just want, $350,000 condo that I can call mine and call it a day. Those options are very few and far between, and there's a lot of reasons as to why that happens. When we take a look and see all the other stuff that people told us that they wanted up at the top there, the housing was really seen as a substantial challenge and something that people really wanted to see addressed. There's a lot of issues with zoning, not just in Dedham, but all over the region, that limits what you can do with single-family homes, limits what you can do as far as building. A lot of times if you want to build something that isn't this or isn't that over there, you have to get a special permit from a town board. And if anybody has ever had to do that, or you're thinking about what that might look like, it's kind of terrifying, right? And even if you're a developer and you do this stuff all the time, people say, I want to make this as easy as possible. I don't want to go through all this time and expense and money to be able to have somebody to say, you know what, I don't like that, I'm done. So we see a lot of really substantial concerns where developers say, you know what, I'm going to stick with the safest bet, make sure that I'm not risking my reputation, my portfolio, my investors' money, and do what the town says I'm allowed to do, which is almost always the single-family housing. We also saw a substantial mismatch between the housing characteristics and what was available. And what that means is that you have a lot of folks out here who live in either one-person or two-person households. They would maybe like to downsize. They say, I got all this stuff, I got all these rooms. They're used maybe a couple times a year when the grandkids come visit. But realistically, folks don't necessarily need a 4-bedroom house once they hit a certain age, and they're not using a whole lot of that stuff with it. It just becomes another thing you got to pay for, right? I don't think there's a single person in this room who's a homeowner that saw their property taxes going down, right? And the more bedrooms you got, the more square feet you're taking up, the more we're just continuing to pay for it, even if your mortgage is paid off. So you have families, young families that can't afford to buy in. You have older folks that literally can't afford to leave because there's nothing for them to downsize to, and everyone just gets stuck. And it doesn't become much of a stretch where any rational person would look at this and say, you know what, I really love it here, but I'm not sure if I can stay. And you have a lot of folks that are saying, you know what, I'd really like to be able to see my kids more, I'd like to be able to see my grandkids more, but there's just no place for them to be able to buy here unless I want to move out or give them the house or have them move in with me. And sometimes it's not a feasible option. So we see stuff like this, and communities all over the region are not that much different than what we have here. And I'm sure I'm already over time at this point. So I want to thank you all very much for giving me a chance to kind of talk about all this stuff today. I'm looking forward to having a conversation over out in the bar area in a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is pose to you the question of where can we go from here, take all of this information that I just kind of info dumped on you, give it a little bit of thought, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all a little bit about everything that we had to say here tonight. Thank you all so much for having me here. Looking forward to seeing all the other presentations.
Thank you, John, and sorry about the technical difficulties here. Hopefully we've got them straightened out. Yeah, really important issue, I know, for all the communities that we're in. Whenever we hear somebody coming forward with some sort of proposal to develop housing, people get very concerned. So I think it's important to have a perspective on what the situation and what the needs are out there. And when we build that housing, we need building supplies, which leads us right into our next topic, which is supply chain. And we're very pleased to have with us today Nicole Z., the plant manager from CertainTeed in Norwood. Nicole.
I don't have any charts. I'm sorry, your data was great. I just don't have any. So I am Nicole Z. I am the plant manager for a 120-year-old company here in Norwood, nearby in Norwood. We make roofing shingles. So as Tom said, we focus a lot on supply chain. So if anybody has tried to do any renovations while they were home in their remote work, it was awfully challenging to find things. I know I tried to get a quote for my house for just basic landscaping, and it was a 10-month excursion. So I understand we are part of that challenge. But a lot of the reason we're having that challenge is for the same reasons I think you guys have all struggled with COVID. You know, COVID hit industries in a variety of ways. We had limited workforce, remote work. We all had different opinions about masks, and we certainly learned what is a safe distance to stand from one another from now forward. So we'll have that. It's going to be like 10 years. We're going to have those dots on the floor, how far to stand away from each other. But for manufacturing, not only do we have that kind of stuff, but we also had quite a bit of other challenges. So we had one of those good problems to have situations where we had so much work we didn't really know what to do with it. And I know that not a lot of people had that, so I recognize there was a completely other side of this coin that I have to recognize. But for us, we were fortunate enough to be busy. But at CertainTeed, we were facing call-outs and quarantines. We had to keep people safe. We had a ton of raw material shortages, truck delays, and a ton of cost increases. So our supply chain, more than anything, was a big challenge. Really, our raw materials is the part I wanted to talk about today. You know, our raw material challenges seemed to be just a chronic, nonstop disruption to our business. You know, our logistics manager, Matt, who's here, became kind of a magician of sorts. We'll get to see a real magician. Matt was a magician in real day life when it comes to everything he had to do. He was constantly trying to pull miracles out of his back pocket. Our facility, generally speaking, takes between 60 and 80 trucks a day of just raw materials, not only the product that goes out, but just raw materials. And those materials, we only have really 2 days worth of storage options. So if there's any disruption within a couple of minutes or a couple of days, we end up having a ripple effect through our factory pretty quickly. We would have these normal weather delays. You know, we had kind of funky weather throughout all of COVID. We also found that suppliers had their own supply constraints. They had other things downstream. And the dreaded force majeure, I don't know how many people had to deal with that, but we had so many suppliers that came down to us and said, it's an act of God. We cannot do anything about it. I'm sorry, you're just not going to get your truck. And that became kind of a constant for us. So all of those disruptions became very challenging for us. We are a high volume producer. We produce something like 9 million bundles of shingles a year out of that facility. And we're servicing everything north of Washington, D.C. and up into Canada. And we had customers expecting things throughout that whole process. So it seemed like almost immediately from the beginning of COVID, every corner we turned, every day we turned, we had kind of a new supply challenge, whether it was packaging or asphalt. You know, we've got this new challenge even after COVID with this new Russian-Ukraine thing going on where petroleum products are now strained. We produce things with petroleum products, so it becomes very challenging for us now. Additionally, we had glass products and minerals and other things, and it seemed like it was just day after day. I think we barely went a week for the entire first year I was in CertainTeed, and I started during COVID, where we weren't trying to get real creative real fast. So we spent a lot of time digging deep. We looked into old relationships and building some new ones. We have the advantage, disadvantage sometimes, but the advantage in this circumstance of being a pretty big company. So we had a lot of leverage. We had a lot of customers that we had built long-term relationships with, which was very helpful. But we already started to see that those were getting strained. So we really had to start finding sources for all of our raw materials. We have a very strict quality standard we stick to, and it's important to us that the product we make still meets that standard, even if we're qualifying alternative materials. So it seemed like I would find out on a Tuesday that we had something missing, and by Thursday we had found a new source. We had to go through and work with our R&D team to look at the specification. We had to work with our logistics team to figure out how to get enough of a volume to run a reasonable enough trial. And then we had to make sure we were going to be able to sell it, because if our customers didn't have product the next day that was planned, we were going to be in trouble for that too. So R&D, quality, logistics, production kind of all jumped in, adjusted schedules, became very agile very quickly. So it became a way of life. You know, when Matt's name popped up on my phone, I would take a deep breath. I'd brace myself for impact, and then I would mobilize a little bit with the team to make sure that we had everything we needed. It really has stabilized a bit, so fortunately we're kind of through the thick of it, which is helpful. We definitely have had the opportunity to settle down a little bit. We're not doing quite as many trials. It's still happening. But some of our longest term partners, the ones that we've been with for decades, have now started to reconsider what their supply chain needs to look like. You know, we used to be a partner to them and they really needed us, and now they don't really need us anymore. They've found these new outlets that work better for their manufacturing and for their budget sometimes, and they're starting to challenge, do we even want a long-term contract with Certainteed or with whomever their supply partner is? So we've had to really step back and look with them in our future strategies, say, okay, what are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do move forward? I liked the question you left with your presentation, because for us, really, where do we go from here? What happens when your suppliers don't need you anymore? And that's really what we've been wrestling with. So our answer to that so far is to remain agile. So now that it's settled down, we have to stay strong. We have to stay focused on reducing sole source. You know, we've been kind of lulled into this thing for so long that our product's gonna be there forever, and it's no longer gonna be there forever. So we're challenging everything. We're challenging our design. What can we do more efficiently, more innovatively, which will help our environmental impact as well? In more stable times, we need to start looking for redundancy in our supply chain, which is not something that was a strategic priority, and now it is a strategic priority for us. We have to test our business continuity plans. I don't know how many people have to create these things on an annualized basis. I can tell you that annually, I'm responsible to create a business continuity plan, and I look at it and I go, check, I've done it for today, and then I move on to my next task, and now I really have to start utilizing that as an actual tool for me to decide what happens if this next supplier or this next supply issue comes up. So if COVID's taught us anything, it's basically that nothing is guaranteed. And so for us, we need to value our experts, both internal and external. I've had the great opportunity to have a really strong team that was all focused and pointed at the right direction. I had come out of a different organization that was facing similar issues, and I saw the chaos of a lack of strategy. You know, everybody's kind of running to cover their own bases, and what's been very nice about this particular facility, and one that I think the team takes a lot of pride in, is that we are focused on being all aligned. We're all working for one goal, which is to support our customers. So we have to continue down that road, and I truly believe without that strong team, we wouldn't have it. And there are times of stress, but if you can stay creative, everybody do their best and stay in line, we will continue to weather the storm. So that's my little story on COVID supply chain issues.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, and we are going to stay on manufacturing, but shift the focus a little bit more to the employee side, and bring up Jerry Racine from the Steel Art Company in Norwood. Jerry.
Thanks, Tom. Wow, this has been so informative already. Wow, thank you so much. I love the words agility. We'll be talking about that in my little talk here. And I just want to say, hey, thanks for being here. Wow, you showed up. I showed up. You showed up. We're ahead of the game. All right. So the question was posed to me, like, what are we going to do post-pandemic about bringing people back to the workforce? Not going to do that. Sorry, took liberty with the conversation and decided to switch it up a little bit. Give you something that you could actually use, because I don't think that they're coming back. Not if it's not a compelling reason. And let me explain why. What happened? What happened? Okay, you can go to the next slide. Oh, I got to learn technology, Jeremy. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, here we go. What happened? So during this unprecedented time, did you have trouble recruiting? Did you have trouble holding on to good workers? Come on, participate. Raise your hand. Woohoo! Raise your hand like your hand's in the air, like you just don't care. Come on. All right. Anyone without their hand up, you get to come up and help present, because we've got to learn from each other, right? We all experience these difficulties in hiring and retaining workers. Just do the job. Huh, how difficult. Well, I'm going to tell you tonight that I think that I need to learn to use technology, that there are 4 concepts that are not new. They've been around forever, and they were on steroids during COVID, right? So we saw things like the Great Recession, tsunami in terminations. You know the facts. You've seen this. I know that I don't have to give you a lot of statistics to prove the point because we experienced it. A deluge of terminations during this time. We also experienced this piece of quiet quitting. People coming to work, but not really working, right? Or not doing as much as we might hope they would do, doing the bare minimum. And we also had, and counteract to that, quiet firing. So if you're not going to do the job, let's just work around you and hope that you quit. Not such a great philosophy, but understandable during a litigious society. We also have double dipping. What's that? Two-timing. Two-timing son of a gun, right? So we just saw over the past week, if you've read the journal, that Equifax just terminated 25 people. Now, let alone it's their business to actually do some of this research to find out where people are and what they're doing during their time working from home. But people were actually working at Equifax, at home, doing another job full-time, or 2, or 3. Great. Make way, hey, where the sun is shining, right? So you know the facts. They're out there. I'm going to move forward. Is this good? I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Pot at the end of the rainbow. Yes. So I'd like to look back on what happened. Let's see. Fact check, sure. And then what happened? Sorry about that. We were trained, at least I think from business schools, right, that we had to look at terms of empowerment and looking at ways to multitask, do it all, right? Lead, measure, engage people. What about inclusion, right? That was a big phase during the 90s and the turn of the century, it seemed like. Yes, turn of the millennium. And failure was not an option. We had to produce. We had to think of ways to engage. We hired based on job descriptions. We identified what the skills and abilities would be to the job that needed to be done. We went out in the workplace and said, okay, find me that person. Can we do that today? Not really. Not really. Okay, some other things are up here. We said, okay, what's a good worker? Oh, yeah, Joe is here from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. How productive is Joe? I don't know. But he was here, right? Did that make sense? I don't know. Come in early, stay late, be here no matter what. Hey, your very presence in this organization makes things happen. Is that right? Give a person that's really busy the task to get something done, they'll get it done. If a person is really good at what they do mechanically on the job, let's make that person the supervisor, the manager. Ooh, what happened? Okay, well, something really happened. Something big happened. What we thought was working, or what we professed in the classroom and in business schools and in the workplace as those tools that would bring us to success, were not bringing us to success anymore. They weren't working. There was a change in attitudes. We could see it. Oh yeah, we could see it. We could feel it. We experienced it in and outside of the workplace. Here's a thought. I love it when I think about this. Who here has heard people say, I have to go to work? Or, I get to go to work. I get to do something. Would you say that's more positive than I have to do something? I hear some interaction here. Thank you. Yeah, cool. All right, so you get it. You get it. So how do we change the I have to I get to? Maybe that's the question. Forget business school, right? This is simple. But is it? Let's see what we got here. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, here's what I'm going to ask you to do, is think about a time when you actually received excellent service, a really good, feel-good experience. Maybe it's at the grocery store, maybe it's wherever, in the workplace. Let's stick to work for a minute. Okay? Or great service. What was happening? I like to ask questions. I like to ask how, when, where, why, the things my mom taught me. Okay, I'm going to give you a personal experience. Thank you, Bobby, for being here, my oldest son. He just came out of Mass General. God bless him. We had an experience, real experience. The shortage of staff, shortage of doctors, chaos, COVID, you name it. You know what it's like. You've heard it, you've seen it. I hope you haven't experienced it, but we did. We experienced a very difficult situation. But yet, one person stuck out in my mind. It was like, boom. This nurse came in, they all do. They come in and out, they're busy doing things. And, I like to ask, where'd you go to school? Like that's going to make a difference in the person's health care. But I like to ask questions, remember? So I said to her, whoa, you're really good at what you do. How do you do that? God, there's all this tough stuff going on, your shortage of staff, et cetera, et cetera. I said, what makes you good at what you do? Please tell me. Without a second, without a hesitation, she turned, she looked at Bobby, she looked at me, and she said, peace from within. Does it hit you? I'm hoping it will, because this is a real story. It hit me. I had to listen to that a couple of times over. I had to really think about it. If I was asked the question, what makes you successful, would I say peace from within? Whew. All right. Change of attitude. COVID clarity. That's what happened. People started asking, well, what's this all about, Alfie? Right? What are we doing? What are we doing? Do we need to be overly stressed and extending ourselves working 6 to 6 just because the boss can see you in the office? No, people said, no, hell no. I can work from home. I can get more done at home than I did if I commuted an hour to get to work to do the job that I can do elsewhere. But people are not afraid to ask questions anymore. I hope not, because questions lead to thought, right? And that's what we really want people to do, is come with their whole selves and think on the job. Think about what's working. What will make it better? We can look at the negativity. The statistics are out there, okay? 8 to 9 times out of the thought process that we have in our head is negative. 1 to 2 times is positive. Huh? Really? Yeah, it's proven. I don't know. Harvard probably came up with that one, right, Raj? Right. So, so what happens is a shift in thinking about things in a different way. If we think the same way and expect different results, come on, you know the answer. That's pretty insane. So we start to look at it as appreciation. Find it, evaluate it, because I appreciated that nurse. Boy, did I really appreciate her. She hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, you know what? During COVID, we had these really cool Netflix stints, at home. We couldn't get away from, I don't know, Jeremy told me it was on Apple TV, right? Ted Lasso. Gotta love the guy. Gotta love the guy, right? He kept saying, I got you. Now Jeremy says that at work. He's my assistant. My son. Yeah, my son at work. Cool. Really cool. Qualified? Yeah, maybe. All right, that's a joke. But we come to work to be with friends. People that are engaged in manufacturing, you can't do that from home, right? You can't manufacture from home. You need to be in the workplace. So we engage people a different way, not by a job description, do you have these check marks of all the different skills and abilities, but rather, hey, your brother works here, your sister works here, your aunt, your uncle, your neighbor down the street, they like you, you must be pretty good. All right, come on in, we'll give you a try. We'll give you a try. And we do that a little bit differently at Steel Out. We don't wait 3 months. It's about 3 days, actually. But anyway, so we move on to creating a safe place where people feel probably even safer than if they were at home. During COVID, that was a real truth. And we are mindful, more mindful about our behaviors, our interaction, our communication. So those initial 4 concepts that I talked about in the beginning, here's the deal. I think they've changed. I'd like to promote this. I'd like to think that this is where we're headed. I know from personal experience, it's what's working. So take a look. Over-communicate. Yeah, I know I'm going to go over 7 minutes. Sorry, Tom. But over-communicate. Over-communicate the positivity. If you want more information about purpose, process, payoff, the 3 Ps that live in life, I'll tell you about it when we have a few drinks, right? Let's talk about what's necessary, what's true, what's valid, what's kind. How can we be kind to each other? Is that so bad to be kind? Hell no. It's everything. It's everything, folks. Focus on the good. I get shivers just saying this. Focus on the good. Identify the strengths. As a consultant for a company, when I was making hay, when the hay was, I don't know, growing, it was going into a company and not saying to them, well, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you should fix this. I got more and more business because I identified what was working, because they hadn't even thought about that. And then I said, how do we make this better? Oh, revelation, right? But it's not. It's easy. You can do it. I can do it. We can all do it. If we think about encouraging and confidence in people, raise them up. Raise people up. Don't put them down, criticize, be negative. Look at what they have to do to help grow your business. If they can find something in the job that's somewhat kind of cool, kind of interesting, or a skill that they have that they can put into action, super. It doesn't need to be rocket science. It's manufacturing. How exciting is that? But it's very necessary, isn't it? Very necessary. So balance our expectations. I'm not going to say work-life balance. Notice the difference. Balance our expectations around work and life. And how does that coordinate within the workplace? Invite people to engage, to be connected with one another. That if we truly convey a sense of wanting to be there, and the key point of all of this that we see, in fact, statistics just came out this week that was overwhelming to me, about showing appreciation. Say thank you as often as you can, as long as it's sincere. It needs to be genuine. People just say lip service. Oh, that's horrible, disingenuous, right? But if we are sincere about saying thank you and identifying what's working and appreciate that, wow. Wow. Okay, so I liked your word earlier in your presentation, agility. That's what we're hiring today. Not necessarily the exact skills to fit the position, but their flexibility, their sense of belonging, the strategic thinking, not just for the tactical here and now of what I have to do today to get the job done, but how is that going to impact my coworker down the line, on how quality is transferred from department to department. Is there mutual interest? Are people hearing and listening to one another? So there are the facts. Kid you not, this is real. Better communication can increase productivity by 35 to 50%. Boom. Where are the accountants in the room? Would we like that? I would think so. Yep, absolutely. 46% of respondents that were answering a survey about jobs and changing jobs, talk about the Great Recession, well, they left because, why? They didn't feel appreciated. Huh? How hard is it to appreciate each other? How difficult is it to find what is working and acknowledge that and make it grow? Make it grow. It only takes a second. We're in a theater. The best, I would think, they might agree with me here, the best show to see on the big screen, Top Gun. Maverick, right? It was a compelling reason to come into the theater versus watching it on Hulu, Netflix, or what have you, because we wanted to see it on the big screen, right? I love the show. It reminded me of COVID because we're in the fight of our lives. We are in a transitional state of identifying offense and defense at the same time. So, as Maverick was asked, where's your team? How come they're not in the classroom studying? Yeah, throw the book away. Why? Because we got to learn how to work together. So I urge you to accept the challenge. One more time. Accept the challenge. It's real. Okay? Accept the challenge. Which concepts, the first four, or perhaps the latter four, are you using in your organization? Are you going to make it better? How do we recruit and retain post-pandemic? We get to figure that out, folks. We get to figure that out. Let's see if this works. No music? One more. Tell me, Jeremy. I just thought it would be fun to hear some music. Shall I whistle? Do you remember the theme song? It's really cool. So don't worry. Whistle while you work, right? Oh, boy. All right. That's about it. That's really the message. And I'm not Brene Brown. I'm not Simon Sinek or Adam Grant, but I gave it a shot, right? So these are some of the other people that do professional TED Talks, and they are awesome. They only take a few minutes. They probably stick to the 7-minute guideline, and they might entertain you. So watch them. Have fun. Thanks for being with me, and thanks for letting me play with you, too. All right.
Thanks, Jerry. We'll move ahead to Sue Jacobs, Ms. Fixit, to talk a little bit about next generation of tradespeople and technicians. And Sue, thank you for the nice little gifts that you brought everybody tonight.
Hello, everybody. So just to say something to you, I whistle while I work. My father did it. I do it. I'm not a great whistler, but I kind of go. And in a lot of my reels and my videos, I hear myself doing that. I'm like, I sound like an idiot, but it's because I love what I'm doing. So with that being said, Jacobs Plumbing started in 1895. I'm 5th generation of master plumbers. I'm the first woman in the family to become a master plumber. I still love plumbing for various reasons, mostly to help people. During the pandemic, I found that I could help people in a different way. People didn't want to have technicians in their homes. But I was strict on my, what I did and how I sanitized and what I wore, and they stayed away from me. And fortunately, I was able enough to work straight through 6-7 days a week, especially because a lot of plumbers don't do service work. And that's what I'm finding. So my biggest thing is trying to get kids interested in the trades, and I'm not sure why. I have opinions, but being in a small business, I'm not in a big firm, but I see it from customers' point of views, and that's in residences, houses, and small commercial. I do speak in front of middle school, high school, and VOTEC schools for the past 5 or 6 years, trying to entice kids. I find that the girls are a little more interested, believe it or not, and I think that's because the unions, carpenter, plumbing, pipe fitter, HVAC, they're really promoting right now to get women into the trades. So women are actually, or girls are actually more interested because they know that they can do the job. I've seen a lot of changes in the plumbing industry. since I started in the late 70s. My biggest thing is when I do talk to these kids in middle and high school, I start out with saying that when I was in middle school, 7th grade, we had to take sewing, cooking, metal, and wood. Okay, so 8th grade, you can pick two. I picked metal and wood. Because sewing an apron and figuring out how to make candy orange peels didn't sound like something I wanted to do. I'd rather work with my hands, so I was hooked. My father actually, I could help him through my whole high school, summers, after work, Saturdays and Sundays. But when I finally graduated, I said, can I, be a full-time plumber, apprentice? And he goes, well, girls really can't be plumbers. So I was like, okay, that's an 81. So I could type really fast, so I became a secretary. Within 6 months, I was like, yep, nope, done. So I went back to him and I said, Dad, let me try it. So he gave me a task of moving we had a 7-section boiler, and we had to get out of a cellar, so we split it. Each section was 100 pounds, and he said to me, I'm leaving. You got to get this section out in that backyard. With a tree and a rope and a pulley system, I got the section out by myself. He came back and he said, you have a job. So that was showing him that it's not necessarily muscle, it's brains. You don't have to be huge with full of muscles to do any kind of trade. Anything's possible. So with that, we have had 15, 20 plumbers back in the 80s, 90s, 2000. And I found or watched that we would bring plumbers in, they would do their apprenticeship, and they'd do the schooling, they would get their journeyman license, some would stay with us, and then we could recoup some of the money that we invested in them for the 3 years, because it was loyalty. And then they take another year and they get their master's and they'd stay with you for 5 or 10 years. Actually, my father had a couple of employees that were probably like 20 years, 30 years. But now, there's no loyalty. A lot of the kids, even whatever trade it is, they think after they get the journeyman, they can go out and start their own business with no business training, with no experience. And after 5 years, they close the business down and then go back looking to work for a company. So my thing is really the loyalty. And I'm not sure how to fix that. And I think the other problem is why people aren't going into the trades is that Massachusetts messed up. I'm not sure exact year, but when I first got my license, it was 3 years to get your journeyman. You had to go to school and work at the same time while earning a living. And then you get your journeyman, and then another year to get your master's. Well, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts changed it from 3 to 5. So within that whole time frame, I'm not sure how many years it is, what kid wants to go to school for 6 years to plumb? They might as well go another 2 and become a doctor, or, I don't know, whatever you do. So I really think that was one of the reasons why there's a shortage of plumbers. I know electricals is sort of the same way. But what the kids don't understand is that while they're working and going to school, they're earning a living. So if you actually Google who makes more money, is a doctor or a plumber, over the lifespan, the plumber makes more money. Because we don't have the loans. We earned a wage from for 18 years old until you retire, 65. Well, plumbers don't retire, so they'll be 65, 75 years old when they retire. So we make a lot of money. It's hard work, it's disgusting work, but I still love it. Been doing it for 40 years, and I wouldn't trade a day. And that's where the love is. If you love what you do, it's not work. I look forward to it every day. I have embraced the technology, especially during the pandemic, because all I do is service work. I don't do any new construction, no remodeling, nothing, just fixing stuff. So I was able to, right at the beginning in March, I started texting people because I could have them text me a photo or a video of what their problem is. I could diagnose it within 2 minutes. And then I would make an appointment, make sure I had what I needed, so there's not that much, contact. They stayed in another room. I was in and out. I got paid, move along. And I've been busier since the pandemic started than I ever was. And it's really, I think, technology. My son worked with me since he was 14. He got his bachelor's in communications. He graduated last year. He did get a job in the career that he got the bachelor's in, which I'm thankful for. But his college loans are all paid for because he worked for me. He has no loans. He paid it right through, 24 years old, and he doesn't have a college loan. And now he has a full-time job at NCM. So I'm very proud of him. But I'm also very proud that having the 10 years experience, he buys a house, he can do stuff. So he has best of both worlds. Is that the answer? I don't know. I have no idea. The problem is that a lot of younger plumbers, this kind of goes back to the housing, a lot of these plumbers, I'm not sure about electricians, I don't know, they rather do new construction or big remodeling jobs that there's more money in it. There's really not. You can build a one-family house, a two-family house, a condo, or the 19. Yeah, the unions are making a lot of money building these, whatever, the 19 units. But I don't know how much they actually take home if you get laid off. Service work, residential, private sector is hurting, desperate. Unions have enough people. It's really the private sector that nobody's going into. And we're all so busy. So somebody will say to me, why don't you hire somebody? I don't have time to train somebody. I'm on the tail end of my career. I'm going to be 60 soon. I have maybe another good 10 or 15 years left of plumbing. I'm just going to do the little stuff because there's the niche. People need the little stuff done. They need emergencies. They have no heat or a burst pipe at 1 o'clock in the morning. They text me or they call me and I'm there. They don't have to wait for, leave a message on a voicemail and hope that somebody will call them back. I usually return a call within usually 2 to 3 hours. Usually by text. I don't call anybody anymore. It's too much of a pain. The other thing I say to the kids when I talk during career days is that the average age of a plumber nationwide is 59, which I am. Average age of an electrician is 56. Long-haul truck drivers is 48. Bricklayers, 41. Carpenters, 42. So what's going to happen in 5, 10, 20 years when your kids need a plumber or electrician? Unless we promote it now, it's, the hourly rate is skyrocketing. I've raised my rates twice since the pandemic started because I return a phone call. I do whatever I can to get whatever I need to do the job. I show up, I do the job, I get paid, and there's no callbacks. And it's a personal relationship. They know me, they know my son, they know my dog, especially because since Facebook, everybody knows everything. So that's one of the reasons why I started that Plumbing Questions Facebook page. I post on my own page how to help. They'll ask a question, how to do this, how to do that. Or I'll send out reminders, don't forget to shut off your outside spigot because it's going to be cold. So I try to use social media if I can't reach them personally. I think social media is huge, or texting is huge. The way that we're trying to get employees is the old school of thinking. We got to think about different ways of getting them. I'm not sure what it is, because I'm not hiring. But, so I agree that everybody, some kids like to go to college, and it's good for them, but some aren't. Back to the, I don't know, I belong to a group called PHCC, which is Plumbing, Heat, and Cooling Contractors, and they're trying to get Massachusetts to go from 5 to 4 years. That might help a little bit, I don't know, but it's still 4 in another year to get a master's license. I don't know if it's enough. We're not rocket scientists. We're not brain surgeons. We do protect the health of the nation. But if you're mechanical and you can read a book and you can pass a test, you can become a plumber and earn a good living. So I think the only thing I can think of after spending 5-6 years talking to kids at career days is that we got to bring back shop class to the middle school. I think, I'm not sure what the percentage might be, but if it's only 5% of a class that does metal, wood, cooking, sewing, you might get that 5% interested in a trade because they're actually doing something with the hands. I go to houses and unless, kids, especially during the pandemic, kids are home, no school, everybody's home, doing remote everything with the computers everywhere, and they don't want to know what you're here for. I'll be like, well, to fix the toilet, to give you hot water, or, and unless it actually affects them, they don't realize what it takes to keep the house functioning until they don't have it. And, that's what, I just don't know how to promote this. So that's just my little thing. One person that works by myself, that's how I see it, because I'm in 6 to 10 houses a day, 6 or 7 days a week. I work sometimes 50 hours, sometimes 80 hours a week, just trying to keep up with the workload. It's just so much. And I'm at the point where I just have to say no to certain people. I've actually closed my towns that I work in. I'm now only working like 6 or 7 towns surrounding Norwood. I no longer go to JP or West Roxbury or Millis. I just don't have the time to do that, which is good for me, but bad. I'm a sucker. I hate to say no. Usually, if there's an elderly person or a baby in the house, I'll make an exception for whatever situation it is. So the one thing I did do is I did start a scholarship in my husband's name. I lost him a year and a half ago, and it's the Ron Marshalsea Trade Scholarship. It is designed to go to a Norwood High School graduate going into the trades. It is a $1,000 scholarship along with a tool bag with $175 worth of basic hand tools. So it's whether they do plumbing or electrical or carpentry, they have a little bag. We did award a kid last year. We've done 2 wiffle ball tournaments in 2 years, and with that, we've raised 9 years worth of scholarships. So we have plans on doing the scholarship for years and years. And that's my little tiny way of hoping one person, if I can get one person interested in the trades, then I've done my job. And that's all I can ask. It's really, suggestions, I have no idea what to do besides what I'm doing. So anybody that's, if you own a big company and you have, trades, think about giving a trade to somebody. It's really up to us. Because you're not going to think of it if you don't put it in front of them. So that's my little story. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate your time. And she mentioned how much she works. She volunteers about the same amount as well in all sorts of organizations in the community. So thanks for that. I will say that I did manage a couple weeks ago to reconnect the chain in the toilet and the back thing there. so I didn't have to call you. But usually if it's anything more than that, you got to call Sue. All right. Maybe we have sound now, Dennis? I think so. All right. Then we'll turn it over to Dennis.
Tasting. Testing. Oh, I guess that's working. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, I'm Dennis Blanchard, and I'm hopefully a magician. And I was here last year. Thank you for having me again, Tom. And I am a member of the chamber. Achoo. Sorry, I'm allergic to donuts. It's an allergy. Sorry. I did that at Dunkin' Donuts. They didn't think it was funny. I said, can I have a coffee and a chew? Oh, got my own. Don't need it. Thank you very much. So, all right, so what we're going to do, a couple of tricks, just a short little quick thing, and then afterwards at the cocktail time, I will be walking around entertaining people with my magique. Okay, so, little story though. I was going to do my escape rope trick. I get this about 10 feet of rope, and it was practicing it, and then I don't know what I did. I misplaced the rope a couple of days ago. So I said, oh, that's great. I'll have to get another one. So I was looking around for a magic shop, and I actually found one in Salem, which was a problem because their magic's a little different. You know, Salem, right, the witches. They use the same word, magic, but it doesn't have the same meaning. In fact, witches, so-called witches, they really hate magicians. I'm going to tie these ends together, see if we can get this to, okay, we got the ends together here. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Let me just show you this first, just so you know. Yeah, they don't like magicians. They basically think that they expose them, you know, because they're kind of like charlatans. So anyway, we won't pick on witches. I was happy to find some rope, right? So I bought the rope, but the lady said, be careful with that. I said, why? Because it's haunted. I said, oh, really? I don't believe that. It's a haunted rope, you know. She says, yeah, whenever you try to do something with it, it'll mess you up. I said, well, I can't have that because, oops, wait a minute. I just want to stretch this out. I got to do my escape trick. Maybe it is haunted. What are you going to do with this? It's all in knots. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, we can do this. I'm not going to be defeated by a haunted rope. Just a minute here. Just get these knots out. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I know they come out somehow here. Yeah. So, sure. Which you bad with your rope here. Okay, we get this. So, they said be careful with that because it is haunted, and we can get this apart. I'm sure I can do this. I'm sure of it. All right, so. Oh, boy. There we go. Now I can do my escape trick. Not a problem. All righty, here we go. So, oh my goodness. She was right. It is haunted. What am I going to do with this now? Oh my goodness. All right. Okay, so. This is not the way it's supposed to work. The second trip's really good. The second trip, thank you. All right, we're going to untangle this because I can. All right. She said to just wind it like this. Okay. There. Oh, it worked. Oh, that's cool. All right. So now I can do my escape trick, which is really cool. Because the way it works is you put the loop around your head like this, right? And then you, oh dear. What the heck? There was 10 feet of rope. These aren't even magnets. It is haunted. Look at that. Who wants to check that out? Check that out. Make sure there's real loops, okay? All right, here we go. Long way to St. Louis there. But it is a new trick. I actually just learned that. I need a volunteer for this segment. I don't do many card tricks because I don't like card tricks. And it's kind of weird because as a magician, they all do card tricks, right? But this is more of a card illusion, and I need someone to come up and volunteer. Come on, don't be shy. It's really a good trick. You'll be happy. I'll give you a souvenir afterwards. How's that? There he goes. All right, let's hear it for him. All right. Okay, so, hi, what's your name? Seth. Seth, I'm Dennis. Nice to meet you, Seth. Okay, here's the idea. Okay, we get to pick a card. The easiest way to find a card when someone picks a card, do them face up. You like that? Take anyone you want, but not a picture card, but not an ace. There's a reason why, and I'll tell you. Okay, the 8 of clubs. How did I know? See, everyone thinks it's all about pick a card, guess a card, but that's not what it's about. This is a different trick. So put your name, Seth, across the white area in big letters on the card. Ruining my card, thanks a lot. That was the little letters. Oh. I want them to be able to see. Maybe you can draw a smiley face or a Mona Lisa or something, anything you want to draw on there. So this makes the only card, that you hold on to the card now, the only card in the world that looks like that. Would you agree that I don't have a duplicate of that card? Yeah. Because I can't, there's no way, you know? So, and we're going to have you just stick it in the middle somewhere, face down. By the way, I think you can see that very well, but he'll attest to the fact that it's got his name on it, and we'll just stick it in there. Okay, so now I'll ask you, what would you do with a card if you're not going to guess it? You know, because most people think you guess cards, right? You know, like that. Well, I can make it float. I can make it vanish. But I want you to hold on to the deck so I can't do anything. I didn't shuffle them and do any sleight of hand. I'm going to make it disappear from the deck when I snap my fingers. And that, folks, is my best trick. No, it's really not in there. It's over there. That's not part of the trick. That's just my nasty speaker. If that's true, then, in this envelope is your card. Would that be a good trick? Would that be impossible?
Anything is possible as a magician.
Is that your card?
Good job.
That's a souvenir. I can't use it. Thanks, Seth. Let's hear it for Seth. Thank you for helping. I just had a 5 minute stint, so you'll see me later at the cocktail hour, and we'll have some fun. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
All right, so for our last speaker, we've got Ian Cook is going to join us from the Neponset River Watershed Alliance. I had an opportunity to hear Ian speak to my Rotary Club a few months ago. He gave an excellent talk, and I know he's going to focus on climate resiliency tonight, and I'm sure it's going to be great. So welcome to Ian.
Thank you. It's always good to be last. So what I'm going to talk about tonight in just a couple of minutes here briefly is really kind of connects a lot of the themes we've talked about tonight. It affects housing, it affects the workforce, it affects our employees, it affects plumbing, if you can believe it. And 55 years ago, the organization I work for, which is the Neponset River Watershed Association, was founded with a mission that at the time probably seemed kind of crazy. Basically, the mission was to clean up and protect the Neponset River so that it would be clean enough to fish and swim in, and so that it would become a valued community asset for environmental purposes, recreational purposes, in all of our 14 communities. At the time, the river was effectively an open sewer. It smelled. When people built things, homes, businesses along the rivers, those businesses were oriented away from the river instead of towards the waterfront because it was disgusting. And over the course of 50 years, we sort of plugged away at that mission, involving thousands of volunteers, business partners, government officials, municipal officials. And today, there's still more to do, no doubt, but most of the Neponset River is usually fishable and swimmable most of the time. The challenge that we see looking forward for the next 50 years for the future of the river is climate change, which is a whole different level of challenge. To be perfectly frank, it's an issue that very quick, because it ties together all the themes we had tonight and affects all of them, it's an issue that's kind of hard to talk about without just being a little depressing. It very quickly gets overwhelming. And we've already started to see some of those impacts we're worried about right now. So things like the drought we had this summer. You know, the Neponset River, people may not realize this, but the Neponset River, we've been measuring stream flow on the river for 85 years continuously. And this year we set 19 new daily low records for how little water can be flowing down the Neponset River. I think everybody at this point is familiar with the pictures of the dumpsters floating through the seaport back in 2018 because of sea level rise. And in the estuary area of our river in Boston, Milton, and Quincy, we have challenges like that. And I think, you know, exhibit number one in the future challenges of climate change for an area like the Neponset watershed is what happened to the Norwood Hospital a few years ago. A very small but intense and short rainfall event that completely overwhelmed the town infrastructure in a very paved area that just did an extraordinary amount of economic, human damage in a very short time. So definitely, frankly, not the kind of stuff you want to bring up at a party. And frankly, that's with the climate change that has happened already. And frankly, there's going to be more and more of those kinds of events more and more frequently. And they're going to disrupt supply chains. They're going to make life that much more challenging for employees as, you know, elderly family members have trouble with heat, and can we get them to show up at work? It's going to create huge ecological problems along the river for wildlife, for water quality, for recreation along the river. So definitely a difficult set of challenges. And, you know, the first thing we always remind people is that we still do have the capacity to, as a society and a world, to change the trajectory of our emissions. You know, we've seen some really encouraging steps in that regard in the past year. You know, the Massachusetts has always been a leader in that regard. We finally see the federal government taking the lead, and we see an entire ecosystem of progress in the private sector that in a lot of ways is actually driving ahead of what the government sector is trying to accomplish now. So that gives us a lot of hope that we can kind of bend the trajectory of emissions and avoid completely some of the worst outcomes that scientists describe. But for better or worse, you know, we are going to have some amount of change that's baked in here. So the silver lining in all this, if you want to call it that, is that we do have the capacity locally to be proactive about anticipating and preparing for the changes that are going to come. And they've set economists loose on this sort of thing, and basically they've found, whenever they've studied it, that investing in preparing for the now unavoidable effects of climate change is about 6 to 10 times cheaper than sitting around and waiting to get clobbered by the next disaster. And there is, in fact, a lot we can do. We can rebuild and redesign our storm drainage systems so that they can capture and slow down that floodwater, store it, help recharge it back into the ground where it can help keep the river and our water supplies flowing through future droughts. We can, we can also try to harness some of the wisdom of natural systems. You know, natural systems, rivers, floodplains have always been able to manage floods, wetlands. We've done a lot in a watershed like the Neponset over the years to pave things. We have about 25 square miles of pavement in the Neponset watershed to fill in wetlands, to fill in floodplains. But we have the technology now to be able to replicate some of those lost functions so that we can restore wetlands, for example, so that they can store more floodwater, keep that floodwater out of our homes and out of our businesses, while also creating new wildlife habitats, new recreational destinations, new storage for drinking water. A good example of that, a good example of something like this that has actually already happened recently is we just finished a project with the town of Norwood on Trap Hole Brook, where there was a aging dam across Trap Hole Brook, which is actually the best, amazingly, trout stream in eastern Massachusetts. And the concern was this dam was in very bad shape, and the expectation was that in the next big flood, the dam was probably going to fail during the flood and add to the flood, sort of make the flood worse in that moment. And right downstream was a very low-lying apartment building. So we partnered with the town to remove the dam, and that accomplished a bunch of things. It protected the apartments downstream. It improved water quality on this stream. It doubled the available habitat for the native brook trout that live in this unusual stream here in Norwood. That's such a great piece of habitat. And it saved the town of Norwood about $2 million. And there are examples over and over where we can do that kind of thing if we're sufficiently proactive. So one of the things we've just started doing, which is very exciting, is we've partnered with 13 different towns across the watershed to put together a flood model to be able to predict where there are going to be flooding problems in the future so that communities can work together to try to find ways to prevent those. You know, imagine how much better off everyone would have been if we'd known that a rainstorm like the one that happened in Norwood, I don't think anybody realized what was going to happen with that if a rainstorm like that happened. If we'd known, we might not have been able to make it, you know, a harmless event, but we probably could have made it a much less damaging event and saved ourselves all a lot of suffering. So I'm not sure if I've landed the plane of making there being something positive about climate change here, but I do feel like, you know, we have the potential to, if we work together and we're proactive, to really avoid a lot of problems in the future. And I think that's going to require the business community working together for sure. It's going to require even stronger leadership than is already happening at the state level, much stronger leadership at the federal level than is happening right now. It's also especially going to require strong leadership by municipalities. You know, the state and federal governments, they tend to fund a lot of things and sort of set a lot of standards, but it's really your municipality that actually builds the drainage system or the water pipe or protects or restores the wetland. So getting our municipalities engaged, I think, is really one of the keys. And all of you are really key to motivating the municipalities to want to work together on those things. So that's my 2 cents about climate change. Hopefully it wasn't too depressing, but I do think we can work together and help make that less of a problem than it would otherwise be.
Thank you, Ian. All right, we're just about done. We do have one last piece of business. We've got a raffle that we had promised, we've been running a membership promotion during the fall, and we've got some new members who have joined us, and we're going to give away a prize to one of them. We're going to give away a prize to one of our members who referred a new member, and then we're going to give away a couple of prizes to you folks. So, Karen has the bag. So the first one we're going to do here is a $100 gift card to El Massimo, one of the restaurants right here at Legacy Place. And the winner is Shonda Sumter. Shonda Sumter. I don't know if Shonda's here. She's not here? Okay, we will get in touch with her. And then we've got the new members. Choose from one of our newest members. This would be, this is a $100 gift card to Liberty in Maine, another restaurant here at Legacy Place, and that winner is Sammy Shack. Sammy Shack is a limo service, and actually the person who referred them is Anthony Brown, and he is also going to win our movie night theme basket, gift basket donated by Compass Real Estate. And our last one is a complimentary portrait session with our resident photographer tonight, Ken Berman. And the winner of that is Zach Patton with Oak Grove Insurance. All right, Zach. And speaking of Ken Berman, our resident photographer, we're going to be doing portrait sessions at the Chamber in November. You'll see it in the newsletter that comes out. But Ken's going to come and spend a day at the Chamber, and for just $100, he'll give you a portrait session, and he'll go through and do the professional photos for you, and you can update your portrait, because let's face it, many of us need to do that. It's been a while, you get it done, you forget about it, and all of a sudden you realize your picture's out of date. So it's good to keep those things freshened up. So look for that, and please join us to get that taken care of. Lastly, I would just once again like to thank our sponsors for this event. The Norwood Bank is our main sponsor, as well as Murphy, Hesse, Toomey and Lehane, and Mass General Brigham. We appreciate their support. We also appreciate the support of our steering committee, whose names are listed in the program, and also Ken Berman, who I mentioned, Darren Carroll from Norwood Video, who is videotaping today, and Showcase Cinemas for hosting us in their wonderful new theater. So, with that, again, thanks to all of our speakers. Excellent presentations. I hope you all have plenty of questions for them, because we're going to go outside and have a chance to meet with them, have some hors d'oeuvres and drinks at the bar. So look forward to seeing everybody out there. Thank you. So this is Chamber Talks. We had some great speakers, we enjoyed some excellent food, great networking, and we had a little bit of magic. Join us next year.